witches and wizards of the world. This is the Hogwarts Chaplain coming to you from the Room of Requirement, broadcasting across the globe on the WWN, the Word and Wizard Network. My friends, I read in the international section of the Daily Prophet this morning that America is awaiting yet another executive order from the current Muggle president. Now, our magical audience may not be familiar with this term, executive order. But here at the WWN, we exist to educate the magical community on the oddities and often obscenities involved with the current Muggle president's stewardship of the grand and noble democratic experiment that is America. But if you are confused as to what exactly an executive order is, you must understand this. Executive orders are not laws. Presidents do not make laws. Executive orders actually have very limited power. It is simply a statement, a signed statement by the Muggle president telling agencies of the government under his direct control things to do or things not to do. The power to issue an executive order was a creation to extend liberty, to allow the executive to fix, to remedy an imperfect democratic system. They were meant to help the delivery of human dignity and the protection of social justice. But they are, in the hands of some people, a loophole that allows the executive to act more like, what's the word? A monarch. But what you must know is that the first great Muggle president, George Washington, issued executive orders as well. My friends, he actually issued 8 executive orders in his time as president. The current Muggle president has issued 12 executive orders. Now, you may say to yourself, those of you who are quite good at arithmancy, that perhaps 8 and 12 are not that different. But keep in mind, my friends, the great Muggle president George Washington issued 8 executive orders over the course of 8 years. The current Muggle president has issued 12 executive orders in about 30 days. That makes his rate of issuing executive orders the fastest in American history. 1 executive order every 60 hours. But another great Muggle president, Abraham Lincoln, also issued executive orders. And one of his executive orders was so famous, it got its own name. It was called the Emancipation Proclamation. Yes, my friends, the Emancipation Proclamation was an executive order. But there were darker days in the history of the presidency in the United States. There was a later Muggle president who issued Executive Order 9066. Do you know what that is, my magical friends? Perhaps those of you who received Exceeds Expectations on your Owls and Muggle studies, perhaps you know? Perhaps any Japanese American can tell you. That executive order established internment camps for Japanese Americans and those thought to be Japanese Americans. So you see, my friends, executive orders can both free people and imprison them. It all depends on who the executive is. All the more reason, my friends, to engage always in the democratic process and choose a good person to serve as president. And then go vote. But wizards and witches out there, you still may feel confused of how something like an executive order can exist within a democracy. I'm here to tell you, my friends, that if you are a witch or a wizard who has read even a single page of Professor Rowling's History of Modern Magic, you know exactly what executive orders are. They just go by a different term in the magical world and in our magical history. You know what executive orders are. We call them educational decrees. Do you remember, my friends, when these hung on the walls all over Hogwarts? When the dark wizard, Dolores Umbridge, became the High Inquisitor at Hogwarts, when she was installed by a corrupt ministry and the levers of government put her in place to wreak havoc on social justice and human dignity at Hogwarts, and to destroy freedom for student and faculty alike, she started issuing silly educational decrees that were meant to curtail the freedom of certain students. But then they got worse. They got mean. They separated people. They created suspicion. They labeled scapegoats. They destroyed freedom. You know what executive orders are, my friends, if you are a witch or a wizard, because you know what can happen when someone with tyrannical sensibilities takes hold of legal loopholes in order to control people's lives. What I will do now, if you are in the radio audience, you cannot see, but I will describe what I am doing. I am going to turn on a light and project a picture of what Hogwarts became under the leadership of someone who was abusing the loopholes of a democratic system to exert her will and to curtail the freedom of people. Lumos. Look, my friends, this is what it looks like when educational decrees get out of control. My friends, the White House is on its way to having these executive orders on every wall it has. This is what it looks like for executive power run amok and the freedoms of people trampled underfoot. Nox. My friends, we are going to be vigilant. We are going to watch every educational decree that comes out of this new Muggle president. And today we're going to focus only on one of them. Educational decree number 2 of the current Muggle president. This one is perhaps the most concerning so far as it relates to the human dignity of people. Do you remember? It was just 2 or 3 weeks ago when this educational decree was issued by our current Muggle president. In theory, it was to extend critical infrastructure projects and direct the government to get out of the way in the development of these projects. It sounds like a good idea, but you know, those of you in America, exactly what that meant. That was to send a green light to the completion of the Dakota Access Pipeline. What is that, you may say? My friends, this is a private company that wants to dig up tribal lands that do not belong to anyone but the native people who live there, and to threaten the water systems on these lands, and to dig through burial grounds of tribal people in these lands. This is an outrage in this country, and there are brave people out at Standing Rock, native people and people who support them, witches and wizards and muggles alike, who have gathered to protect the water, to protect the land, and to honor the commitments that the federal government have made to native people. But if you know anything of this sad history, you might say to yourself, since when has the federal government in America honored the treaties made to native people? This, my friends, is a very good question. And it is why so many of you in the resistance are at Standing Rock and the other native lands in this country that continue to be eroded by the federal government, by private companies, by people who do not respect the treaties that have been made, to the honorable people who are natives to this land. My friends, we in the wizarding world know the dangers of not respecting the rights of native communities. We know this history. And for those of you who are muggles, let me share just a little bit of it. In 1811, according to the great historian J.K. Rowling, the Ministry of Magic decided it was time, because of population explosions, to begin to categorize the creatures in the magical world. They approached creatures like centaurs and merpeople and suggested that they be called simply beings, because they were not human beings. There was a bit of a revolt, and the centaurs and the merpeople knew better that they were going to be separated, segregated by these new terms. They fought back. They did not want to be half humans, just beings. And so after that period, they became known as beasts. But my friends, things only got worse from there, because once they became beasts, they were not human beings, they were not beings, and slowly their rights were eroded. Their rights to land, their rights to vote, their rights to participate in anything going on at the Ministry of Magic. They lost their representation. There was assaults on their dignity. My friends, this sad history has played out in the magical world. But Hogwarts was always a sanctuary school, and therefore the merpeople were allowed to live as they pleased in the Black Lake, and centaurs were allowed to have their land in the Forbidden Forest. But it was not so across other parts of the UK. It is a sad story that continues to this day, and there are people in the resistance across Europe protecting the rights of native people. But I tell you about one centaur this morning, Firenze. Those of you that have read the modern history know that he sacrificed a good relationship with his own people to save Harry Potter, who was attacked by Voldemort in the Forbidden Forest in Harry's first year at school. He saved Harry Potter, and for that, he was rejected by his own people. But then he became a teacher at Hogwarts because Dumbledore knew, in his great wisdom, that Firenze knew things that other people didn't know, that he had contributions to make to the Academy. There were things that were rare and beautiful and true that Firenze, and only Firenze, could share. And what you must also know is in the great battle for Hogwarts, on the day that Voldemort was finally taken down, it was Firenze who was one of the first people seriously injured in that battle. And the story says that he lay in the Great Hall and he bled almost to death. But what happened on that day? What did everyone witness? They all saw what Dumbledore always knew, that the blood in the veins of Firenze was as red as any wizard. He was a hero, my friends. He gave his life. He gave his life. We are grateful to know, though, that he lived through the experience and was eventually honored both by wizards and witches and centaurs. My friends, the current Muggle president needs to be told by the resistance every hour of every day that native communities in this country are people, human beings with rights and dignity. And what are they doing at places like Standing Rock? They are not just defending themselves. They are defending the land and the water enjoyed by all of us, a threat to native people and their concerns, people who say they belong to the land. A threat to them is a threat to all of us and to the resources we all enjoy. Thank you, water protectors at Standing Rock. Thank you, native people who are protecting the land that we all love. You are brave, and our prayers go with you. My friends, only 10% of native communities survived the arrival of Europeans to America. Yes, only 1 in 10 native people lived through that experience. Do you know what that means? That means every native person you see standing in front of you on this land, every single one of them is a girl or a boy who lived. I sign off today considering the first sentences of the first page of the first book of the Bible. Those of you that know the story know in the book of Genesis, we hear the story of creation itself, my friends. It's one of my favorite stories in the Bible. Now, some of you believe this is history. Some of you believe it is sacred myth. But that is a matter of interpretation between you and the text and God. But here at the WWN, we are going to focus on what the words actually say. And then it is up to you what you do with those words. But let's not confuse ourselves of what the text actually says. And it is relevant to this question of human dignity. You remember that the story begins that God creates the world over a certain number of days. And in the beginning, light is created. And then as the days go on, certain things are created and then separated and become beautiful and diverse at the end of every day. So you have light and dark, and you have the dome of the sky and the earth, and you have waters. And it is a beautiful meditation on creation. But notice something, my friends. As soon as creatures are created in this sacred story unfolding, every day ends more or less the same way. On the days plants are created, there is a sentence at the end of the day that says, you have plants of every kind. And then on the day fish are created and creepy crawling things, it says at the end of the day they were created of every kind. And then on the day animals are created, the passage ends by saying animals created of every kind. You begin to realize that there's a repetition of this idea, my friends, that the Creator makes things at the beginning of the day, and by the end of the day, there is an explosion of diversity, and the thing made in the morning, by the afternoon and evening, has many, many kinds. But one day is different. The day on which men and women were created. That passage is the first to not end with that phrase, of every kind. Instead, it says that you have two things, man and woman created together. It says it 3 times, that they are together, man and woman together, to make the image of God. On every other day, there is an explosion out of things into different kinds. And on the day that humans are created, they come together. One image of God. My friends, the lesson of the passage is clear, no matter how you interpret it. There are not kinds of people. People are in the image of God. This is the message of this passage, and it agrees with Professor Rowling. There are not kinds of human beings. There are human beings. I speak now to the current Muggle president. Sir, you have said many, many times that your favorite book is the Bible. So I ask you, have you read the first page? Because if you have, you know what people know who have read it, who have read J.K. Rowling, and who have looked into their conscience, and have looked at native people, any people, and known in their heart, in their favorite story, and in this scripture, there are not kinds of people. And educational degrees hung everywhere in the world cannot change that. Thank you for tuning in. This is the Hogwarts Chaplain speaking to you from the Room of Requirement, saying, you will know the truth, and the truth will set you free. And always and everywhere, be a seeker.